Hey guys, how's it going? So as you can see by the title, I want to bring back this little series again of my top 5 albums of the month. And I can't really call it a series because the last episode I did was the first episode I did, and that was all the way back in like November or December. But now I'm bringing it back and hopefully it'll stay, and I hope to do it monthly from now on. So yeah, let's get into it. And for those of you who didn't watch the last episode, how this list is broken down is mostly because of two factors. One of them is obviously how often I listen to the album, which is actually kept track through my last FM account. I find it a really good way to track your albums. It's connected to my Spotify, my Google Music, even my media player. So I keep track of the albums I listen to constantly, and that's just the most accurate way I can tell how often I've been listening to certain albums and stuff like that. And the second factor, which is most likely going to be the more weighing factor on the albums that making it on the list, is going to be how often I listen to it. Because I listen to music as background music a lot of the time, actually, while I'm studying or while I'm cleaning my room or whatever. So the reason why this is a weighing factor is what albums that I have listened to a lot did I actually sit down and listen to and thoroughly enjoy. So without further ado, let's get started with the list. And number 5 on this list for this month of March is gonna have to go to Get Lost, Find Yourself by Chunk No CaptainChunk. Chunk No CaptainChunk is probably one of the biggest easycore bands out there right now, and I feel like the way that this band made this particular album so good and so different compared to even just of their past albums or other bands is that they didn't make it sound so easycore. And for those of you who don't know what easycore is, it's just sort of a mix of pop punk and like post-hardcore and metalcore and just slammed into one. And you could tell an easycore band because it sounds a bit pop punk with like the power chords and stuff like that, and there are just some breakdowns or some like metalcore riffs in them. But I feel like this album just step it up to the next level. This album in particular has a certain energy that's not just so uppity and just jumpy like pop punk or moshy and heavy like metalcore. And there are a lot of parts on certain songs, and there are some songs in general that have that vibe and that are just specifically heavy or specifically like poppy and stuff like that. But some songs in particular, like the songs Set It Straight and Worst Case Scenario, just really show how much this band has matured and evolved. And I feel like this is the best representation of bands maturing in this scene, particularly from the lyrics to some of the guitar riffs and guitar chords, and even some of the bass parts on this album are a lot more intricate and a little bit more thought out compared to their last albums, which I really appreciated. And number 4 on this list is gonna have to go to American Football with their second self-titled album. My instincts are the enemy. I warned you. Now I might be getting some flack without mentioning their previous album, their first album, and honestly I've listened to that album enough to where it doesn't really get me as much anymore. It's still a great album, it's still a wonderful album, and the songs still mean a lot, but I honestly feel like this album is still probably just as good as their previous album, even however many years later. The guitar riffs and even like some of the drum parts are just so well done and so complex, and I really enjoyed it. And I come to this album when I actually just sort of want to calm down from like a long day and listen to something calming. And as of recording this video, it's still sort of cold outside. It's not, even though it's the start of spring, it's still not that warm out. And I've been listening to this album in general all throughout the winter season, and this is just a great album to listen to with this weather, or this past cold weather. Coming to the next album on this list, it's gonna have to go to Ground Culture by Kingdom of Giants. So I have to confess something. I haven't been listening to heavy music all that much in the past few months or even in the past year. But when I listened to some of the songs on this album, this band just pulled me back in. A lot of this album is so heavy and so fast paced. But besides that, even though this band in general is a heavy band, I feel like this album and how they wrote the instrumentals and the vocals and everything is really, really well balanced between catchy melodics to heavy breakdowns to even, shredding and complex riffs. A lot of the songs on this album had a great mix of all of these three factors that sort of make up a lot of, modern metalcore and metal music in general. And it sort of keeps the album pretty consistent, which I really, really enjoyed. This mix just kept me enjoyed pretty consistently throughout the whole entire album. And I also have to note that the lyrics on this album are pretty inspiring, even though a lot of it has been said before. Finding yourself, or like establishing yourself as an individual, empowering yourself for just you instead of society. But I feel like the vocalist of this band just has such a unique voice. In the balance of things, it's sort of helps carry that message and makes it a bit more powerful. Also, the little monologues in between songs are pretty cool. The number 2 album on this spot, and this is gonna be a mouthful. It's gonna be the album Nothing I Write You Can Change What You've Been Through by Trash Boat. Hopefully I got that right. Trash Boat is a band I've actually been listening to just a little bit before they announced making this album, and I really enjoyed their past stuff. But this album sort of carried what they were before and just put it on a whole new level. I remember watching the trailer for this album, and the vocalist said that he's not that great at talking about his problems, even to his close friends and relatives. Writing and doing music is the best way that he can put himself out there, and you could really tell on this album, not only from his perspective, but the whole entire band, every single riff and every single chord and every single word on this album just carries throughout the whole entire thing. It's a really powerful and a really personal and a really emotional album. And not only that, it's, even though this is a pop punk album, I feel like a lot of the songs sound pretty different compared to a lot of what other bands do. And there are a lot of slower songs, and there are some trancey parts in some of the beginning of songs, and it just carries itself really well. Even with the crazy title that this album is named after, it shows that things in life aren't consistent, and they made this album really well, like tying to someone's life compared to trying to make a statement in society. And it just goes back to just seeing writing and seeing like music and songwriting as an outlet, and making that into art, which I really, really appreciated listening to this album and feeling the emotions that are put into the songs of this album. And number 1 on this list for the month of March, it's an album that everyone probably knows by now and has listened to probably at least once, and that album is going to be 24K Magic by Bruno Mars. I got a condo in Manhattan. Baby girl, what's happening? You and your ass invited, so gonna get to. So I know the last few albums on this list are really powerful in messages, and the lyrics mean something a bit more than just written out rhymes. But this album, I can't say that it does that with the lyrics. But what did really catch me about this album is the actual music, and Bruno Mars is singing on this album. Even though all the songs on all the albums of this list I've thoroughly enjoyed, I can easily say that there wasn't a single second of this entire album that I wasn't entertained. Even the slower songs on this album, like Versace on the Floor or Calling All My Lovelies, I just was so entertained by this whole entire album. Even the radio single on this album, I still listen to it and I haven't gotten sick of it yet, because it's just that good, and it's a great way to start an album. Each song just gets better. Even the last song on the album, you can't even really tell that it's the last song on the album, and when it ends and the album stops, you're sort of just like, wait, that was the end? I didn't want that to be the end, and I don't want this album to just be 10 songs and 40 minutes long. I want more of it, and it makes me really, really excited on what Bruno Mars is gonna make next. I'm not even a huge fan of his stuff, but this album just made me fall in love with his music. So yeah, those are my top 5 albums of this month. and hopefully you enjoyed it. Give this video a like if you liked the albums on this list, or if you didn't like any of the songs on this list, you can go ahead and give a dislike. And if you actually have been listening to some of the albums that I've mentioned, go ahead and leave a comment. I want to know what songs people have been listening to. Or better yet, if you have some albums that you've been listening to and you want to mention, go ahead and comment that too. I really want to listen to new music, and hopefully with this series it's just encouraging me to explore music and expand my library. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video. See you in the next one.